Hi, Jeff here. Something a little different this morning. I was just checking some of my wine that's being brewing right now as we speak, and it just kind of occurred to me. I know a lot of people that make wine as I do, and it seems to go real well, kind of hand in hand with playing a guitar. Most people agree I make a better wine than I play my guitar. But anyways, what I'd like to do, it's funny how many people don't have an idea what the very basic process of what's going on when wine is fermenting. So I just thought I'd tell, even people who make wine a lot of times don't really quite grasp what they're doing. They follow the recipe, they make the wine, they make pretty good wine, some of them real good wine, and but a lot of people don't have an idea what's going on in there. So a quick run through here. Making wine, making alcohol, sugar, good water, not tap water with chlorine in it, good water, yeast, and then some sort of a base. Be it, as right now I'm doing some rhubarb, but rhubarb or strawberry or whatever you're making, dandelion wine, clover wine, you can make just about anything into wine. I read one time the wine teacher said that he could take the table that he's teaching a wine class on and turn it into wine, because in a sense it's wood and it's a living thing, and he could turn it into wine, and probably so. But what goes on is you take sugar and a liquid water and add yeast to it. Now yeast, it's got to be wine yeast. Yeast is a living thing. As soon as you put the yeast in with the sugar water, the yeast comes to life, begins eating the sugar. That's what yeast feeds off of, is sugar. It eats sugar and it expels alcohol. It turns the sugar into alcohol. It pees out alcohol is what I tell some people. It's a little descriptive, but that's what it does. It eats it, and its waste product is alcohol. Fruit, more or less just a flavoring, but the fruits, if you pick your own, you get your own grapes, you get whatever, fruit has a high sugar content, and that's where your sugars come from in wine. But you can take a fruit base, add sugar to it, and then the last thing you need is a hydrometer. Now I'm not getting technical on you, but what that does, as it floats in your wine as it's fermenting, as the sugar and water are mixed together, this becomes more buoyant and it floats higher up. It'll float higher up in the liquid. As the yeast eats the sugar and turns it into alcohol, it becomes thinner, less buoyant, and the hydrometer sinks slowly. And this lets you know where the alcohol process is at any particular time. When it gets to a certain process, at a certain level, you transfer it into a different container, you do different things. But I'm not explaining the recipe here. I'm just getting across what the basics are that causes wine. You could actually do away with the fruit, and you could take sugar water, add yeast to it, a good yeast, and just turn water into wine, or into alcohol. It would turn it. So you could make alcohol with just the three things. So that is actually the basis. Now, once the yeast is eating the sugar, this is the other thing. The yeast will quit fermenting for two reasons. One, it will run out of sugar, run out of food, and die. Then you'll have a very dry wine, because the sugar is all completely removed from it. It'll stop fermenting. At that point, there's ways of then sweetening the wine back up. The other thing that will kill the wine is alcohol. It can only stand so much alcohol. So if you have a lot of sugar in there to begin with, your yeast may die from alcohol poisoning when it reaches, depending on the yeast you use, at 12, 14, as high as 18 and 20% you can get with different yeasts. That's all part of the winemaking process, but that's what's happening. Yeast is eating sugar, expelling alcohol. It quits fermenting for two reasons. It runs out of food or it dies from alcohol poisoning. This is what causes dry wines, is when it runs out of sugar. When it dies from alcohol poisoning, it can still be a sweet wine. So this is the basic thing. That's all I wanted to get across, is what is going on in that process when you have wine fermenting. It's very basic. Now when you get your recipes and you try them out and you get online and find out how to make wine, knowing what's actually going on in that fermenter, the basics, really goes a long way. It helps you understand why you're adding certain things that recipes call for, or the different variables in the wines you're making. But this is the basic. This is the basic thing, how wine is made. Well, thanks for listening.